Hey guys, it's been a minute. Welcome back to another episode in the Path to the Match series. It's been a little while, so let's do a quick recap of everything we've talked about so far. In the first video in the Path to the Match series, we went over how to write a good personal statement. In the second video, we talked about how to secure good letters of recommendation and how to upload them. In the third episode, we talked about how to fill out the ERAS application and some general tips and tricks for filling out the application and making yourself stand out. In the fourth episode, the most recent episode, we talked about the most commonly asked interview questions and how you can prepare to answer them. In today's video, we're moving right through the interview season because in a few short weeks, you guys are going to be receiving your interview invites after you submit your ERAS application. So today's episode is going to be on all things related to what you should be doing prior to your interview. Interview day can be really stressful, and just like step one, just like step two, the best thing you can do to put your nerves at bay is prepare in the best possible way that you can. Interviews can actually be pretty fun, they're pretty conversational, but it's a lot easier saying it now that I'm on the other side. And really, you never know what interview day is going to throw your way, especially for this upcoming cycle where nobody really knows what's going on. The good news is interviews are more or less the same. The large amount of preparation you will do prior to your first, second, and third interview. Beyond that, it's just going to be touching things up here and there and refreshing your brain every once in a while to remind you what you want to talk about during the interviews. So the first thing you should be doing to prepare for your interview the night before is go on the program's website and do some research. You want to know the basics of the program because they are going to ask you on the interview, why do you want to come here? You don't want to give generic answers, and although talking about location and having family ties to the area are things you can use as supporting factors, you always want your primary reasons to be program specific. Do they have NIH funding in hematology research and you're interested in pursuing a career in hematology oncology? That's something excellent to mention in the interview. Are they an inflammatory bowel disease center for excellence and you're interested in doing GI? That's something else you can bring up on your interview. There are so many different things that are listed on programs' websites that you can bring up on interview day. The other reason you want to do some research on the program the night before is because everyone you come across, or in this year's case, everyone that you speak to, is going to ask you if you have any questions. And you always feel really guilty if you don't have any questions because it makes you feel uninterested. However, you don't want to ask questions just for the sake of asking questions, because if you already have the answer to those questions on the program website, it's going to make you look underprepared, especially if other candidates aren't asking those questions because they already know the answer to that because it's listed online. So make sure for both reasons that you do some research the night before. Most programs have very informative websites, and even a lot of times when you're reading, you may see a specific track that the program offers that you might be interested in and would like to ask further questions about on interview day. So not only does it inform you, but it may help you think of questions that you can ask on interview day as well. The second thing I actually recommend doing the night before the interview is do some research on the person who's going to be interviewing you. The majority of programs, although not all, will send out an itinerary either the night before or even a few weeks in advance when you initially accept the interview invitation. And this will sometimes include the name of the faculty member or the program director who will be interviewing you. Keep in mind that this is subject to change. Medicine is very unpredictable and they may have to pull a different faculty member in to interview you. So don't let it fluster you if the faculty member that you wind up interviewing with is not the same as the person who is listed on the itinerary. This does sometimes happen. Don't let it fluster you. It will just be conducted in a more natural manner. But the positive things that can come out of researching your interviewer prior to interviewing with them is it can actually give you talking points during the interview and make the conversation flow a little bit better. For example, if one of your hobbies is running and you actually see online that your interviewer is interested in running as well, this could be a good talking point and both of you can actually kind of bond over this. You'll be surprised to see how often you actually share interests with your interviewer because a lot of programs will try to match you with an interviewer based off of your interests as well as your future career goals. The second reason I recommend doing this is because this can actually give you some insight into a program sometimes. You'll be surprised to see how many people do their residency, fellowship, chief year, and then stay on faculty at the same institution that they originally did their residency at. If this is the case and they do all of their training there and they choose to stay on staff, this is a huge positive reflection on the culture of their program and how good the work environment probably is. People are not very likely to stay somewhere where they're miserable, but if they're very happy there, they see no reason to leave. And if someone has been there for quite some time and involved in academics, you can actually use this as an opportunity to see what they like about the program currently and how the program has changed over the years. Have certain things that needed work gotten better? Have certain things that didn't need work stayed the same? What stayed the same? What changed? This is something that you can actually get to know from your interviewer if they did multiple trainings, such as their residency, chief year, fellowships, etc., all at the same institution. The next thing I recommend doing the night before the interview is review your CV. So early on in the interview season, it's not going to be a huge deal because you're going to be prepping very hard for your interviews. You're going to be reviewing your CV often, trying to figure out what you want to say about each experience that you have listed, about each award you have listed, etc. But once you've done this a few times, and you have the answers down pat, and all of the interviews start to sound relatively the same, you start to sound like a broken record, just clicking play at the beginning of every interview and saying the same things over and over and over again. However, there will be times later on in the interview season, if you don't continuously refresh your mind as to what's on your CV, where you will be blindsided. I will give you a personal example. I did a selective in Grenada called Integrative Medicine. I had this listed on my application. It was one line and it was a pass-fail selective, so it said pass. One line saying integrative medicine, pass. Nothing else. I completely forgot this was on my application and I was not asked about it until the middle of January. So when I was asked about it, I was very taken aback because I forgot that it was even on my application. So I recommend, to prevent stuttering and frustration and just being flustered in general on interview day, just briefly review your CV, even if later in the interview season, when you become more comfortable with interviews, if you review it once a week, just to keep it fresh in your head. The next thing I recommend doing prior to the interview is reviewing the most commonly asked interview questions and making sure you have a solid answer for each of those. The reason I recommend this is because the general layout of interview questions is going to be the same on every single interview. It doesn't matter that this year it's virtual and last year it was in person. The interview questions are going to be the same. Programs are looking to get the same information and same sense of who you are, and they're going to do it by asking the same questions over and over and over again. You can prepare your answers to the most commonly asked interview questions in one of two ways. One, you can go to the video in the Path to the Match series prior to this where I talk about the 8 most commonly asked interview questions and give you tips on how to create a good and solid answer. The other thing you can do if you're interested in getting a sense of some other questions that may be asked is go on the respective website for the large organization of whatever specialty you are applying for. For example, if you are applying for family medicine, the AAFP has the most commonly asked interview questions for family medicine listed on their website. For internal medicine, the ACP has the list of most commonly asked interview questions on their website. These are really great ways to prepare some of the questions that may be less commonly asked but still may appear in your interviews. If you watch my prior video on the 8 most commonly asked interview questions, I would say about 80 to 85% of your ground is going to be covered and that you will have a solid answer for 80 to 85% of the questions you're going to be asked on interview day. So what are the other 15? Well, the other 15% of interview questions are often going to be things either to blindside you, test your medical knowledge, or to see how you react in a situation. For example, some places on interview day will present you with an ethical dilemma and just see what you would do and how you would respond. There's no right or wrong answer. It just gives them a little bit of insight as to who you are as a person and how you problem solve. The most important thing is don't let the blindsided questions fluster you. You are not going to be judged off of the answer to one question, but rather your interview as a whole. So for example, if you're asked on interview day what flavor Jolly Rancher you would be if you were a Jolly Rancher, just say watermelon or green apple or something and move on. They're not going to judge you because you said blue raspberry. They're going to judge you as a whole, not off of one single question. So review the 8 most commonly asked interview questions, have solid answers prepared for those, and you should thrive. The next thing I recommend doing prior to the interview is generating a list of questions that you plan to ask on interview day, but keep in your mind that this is subject to change. Most programs will start their interview day out with what's called a program overview. Basically, what this is a PowerPoint presentation given to you by an assistant program director, the program director themselves, or a chief resident, which basically goes through all of the information about what their program is like and what they have to offer. These are usually really great because they're very informative. However, they usually answer most of the questions that you already have on your list of questions you plan to ask. You're going to be asked so many times during interview season by everyone you come across if you have any questions. You're going to be very tired of hearing this question come January, and you're never going to want to be asked this question ever again as long as you live. However, you should always have at least one question prepared for the faculty member or the program director who is interviewing you. The hard part about this, and the reason I say keep it subject to change, is because you're going to receive so much information on interview day that you don't want it to look like you weren't paying attention and ask something that was already answered. However, the good thing about receiving all of this information on interview day is that it can often stimulate more questions that weren't on your list in the first place. For example, if in the program overview they talk about a global health elective, you can ask the program director, what have their residents' experiences been like when they went on a global health elective? Are they still even offering global health electives given that the pandemic is now occurring and there's not that many places to travel? If they are still offering the global health elective, where are some places that they're actually allowing their residents to go? One of the questions I've been getting really frequently lately is, what should I ask on interview day? And honestly, I can't tell you that. You should be asking questions based off of what you're looking for in a program and what your long-term career goals are and how programs plan to get you there. For example, if you're interviewing at a very small community hospital for a general surgery, a good question to ask the program might be, how do your residents get the required number of cases in each specialty when the hospital isn't that big and the volume is not that high? If you actually care as to whether or not you're going to be happy at the program, you could always ask the program director or the staff member interviewing you, why do you think residents choose your program? Traditionally, a lot of people like to ask about the trajectory of the program as well. For example, what large changes do you see happening within the next year, 3 years, 5 years, etc.? And honestly, I feel like that's a little bit of an unfair assessment at this time. I can tell you firsthand that there are changes happening all the time in every hospital that everyone I know is at. A lot of programs are preparing for a second wave of the pandemic, and this is something that's going to be subject to change. A better question might be inquiring about the pandemic. How has the pandemic affected the schedule, the structure, the academics of your program? How are your residents adapting to the changes? The next few tips are mainly for the 2021 applicants who are going to be virtually interviewing. Number one thing is make sure you have a good Wi-Fi connection. Test it out the night before. Zoom your mom, Zoom your cat, Zoom your cousin's brother's uncle, I don't know, Zoom somebody. Make sure you have a good internet connection. If you've never used Zoom or if you've never used Skype or whichever modality the interview is being conducted on, I recommend playing around with it the night before and maybe even connecting and creating a session with your mom or your friend or another med school friend of yours who is going through the interview process as well, just to kind of play with it and get a feel for things so that you're not flustered and trying to figure it out on the morning of interview day. The next thing I recommend is make sure that you have good lighting. I know that this sounds very basic, but programs don't get to actually meet you, and so having good lighting allows them to see you and feel like they're meeting you the best that they can. It's your big interview day. You should want to show off your gorgeous face to programs, so purchase a $30 ring light on Amazon. I don't like recommending things to people that cost money because the ERAS application is expensive in itself. But since you're saving $3,000 to $5,000 a year on travel, make sure that programs can see your pretty little face on interview day. The next thing is know which type of interview is going to be being conducted. There's actually two kinds of virtual interviews, the live and the pre-recorded. The pre-recorded is really common with emergency medicine in the past years, where they basically give questions and then you record yourself answering the question. The live interview is going to be similar to you being in person and is essentially like a Zoom meeting. To my knowledge, most of them are going to be in the live format, but just in case you do get an interview for a pre-recorded session, just make sure that you read the email and the interview invite in its entirety to make sure you know what type of virtual interview you are stepping into. And the last thing is make sure you have a quiet space with no interruptions. Whether this means staying at your home in a quiet room or going out into a public space like a library or a breakout room where you can go to prevent yourself from being interrupted. The last thing you want on interview day is to be in the middle of explaining your lifelong goal and your little brother knocks on the door asking you to make him a pancake for breakfast. So there are all the tips I have for now. I know that this is a really stressful time and that preparing for the interview is like preparing for the biggest job interview of your life. But a few months from now, you'll realize that you've had some of the best conversations in your life during interview season and that they're very conversational and they're really not that scary. I know this year is a little more scary because they're virtual, this has never happened before, and no one really has any advice, but they're going to go okay, you're going to match, and I can't wait to see where you wind up. Don't forget to like, don't forget to subscribe, and don't forget to follow me on Instagram.